Welcome, 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 everyone, to another episode of No Bibs, Burps, Bottles. We are the number one online community, platform, and brand that empowers, supports, inspires, and love on child-free African American Black women. And our motto is to make sure that they are living their best child-free life. I'm so excited to have a bonus episode and a special guest on this day. And I am just so excited to chat with Shweta, who's going to share a little bit more about her child-free journey. So Shweta, let's get right into it. I would love for you to share your name, where you're from, your career, and share an interesting fact about yourself.
Hello, Dr. Angela. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast. It's a real privilege and honor. So my name is Shweta Ramkumar. I am of Indian and Southern Asian background. So yes, even though your podcast is about African American women, I still sort of fall under that minority women of color group. So I thought this would be a good chance to share a different perspective of child-free life that people experience as Southern Asians.
Yes.
So I'm based in Melbourne, Australia. I've been here for the past 2 decades, really. And my career is a combination of being in both education and healthcare. So it's like a healthy middle ground between them. And I'm based here with my child-free partner and our dog. So we're a nice little happy family. And that's pretty much it. I do my career, my business takes up a lot of my time, but I really try and jump on as many of these podcasts as much as possible to really raise awareness, remove the stigma, and normalize the whole child-free choice and make it more visible in minority groups and women of color. An interesting fact about me would be next year I would have traveled to 42 countries.
Wow.
So travel is one of my biggest passions and hobbies. So it's like one of my ways of really taking care of myself, and it is one of the main reasons why I'm child-free as well, because I love to travel spontaneously. Yes.
Wow, I am so far behind. I have 42 countries. That's amazing. And what's even more amazing is that, again, you're able to do that with freedom and not regret, right? You're able to do that without thinking I have to rush home to make sure the kids are fed and the kids go to school. So again, one of the perks of being child-free that you get to travel as much as you can. So Shweta, I would love for you to share. I appreciate that you reached out to me, and I also appreciate the fact that you are expanding this conversation in regards to minority women or women of color. So I'm going to jump right into this question. It's a question that I typically save for later, but I want to kind of talk about it now. So what are some of the similarities or differences you see in your specific culture when it comes to being child-free or being child-free by choice? And the reason why I asked that question is because, again, as an African American woman, culturally, family is very important. And a lot of times, the bigger, the better. And sometimes it may be hard for African American parents to understand that their son or daughter does not want kids. So I would love for you to share with our audience the similarities and differences in regards to being child-free in your culture.
So the Southern Asian culture, again, is very, not only is it very family orientated, but it's also very pro-natalist. It's very sexist and traditional, and religion plays a huge part in it. So, and also the concept of gender norms is very, very strong over here. So from a very young age, women are indoctrinated pretty much since the second that they are born, that they're only put on planet Earth to be someone's wife, someone's mother, and someone's daughter-in-law. And their role really is to take care of everybody. So they should not have any sort of rights or opinions or life of their own. They should completely devote themselves to taking care of everybody. First, it's the parents and siblings. Then it's, as you get married, it'll be the husband, his parents, and then you have children. And that's really indoctrinated from a young age. And anyone who sort of veers from that really traditional path, that life script or that narrative, it's very tabooed, it's very frowned upon, and it's not really received very well in general. Now, I have been very fortunate in the sense that I'm not the first child-free person in my family. My family is quite progressive in that sense. There's been a lot of emphasis on education, building a career, and also being financially independent. And a lot of particularly women in my extended family are just like me. So they have chosen, for whatever reason, to not have children. So when I have known since the second I was born, like it goes back to the whole nature versus nurture element that you know I felt that I was programmed from a very young age to be child free genetically. But I also felt the environment that I was brought up in. I just saw a lot of things, the way women were conditioned, the women were treated, the fact that they had no freedom, they had no life of their own, they had no autonomy. And this is what I was exposed to from a very young age, even though I was not necessarily raised that way. And I just said to myself that I just want no part of this. And I would have been as young as 6 or 7 years old when I first told my parents that, yeah, I don't. Not only do I don't want kids, I also don't want to get married. And they took it very well. They were like, yeah, it's completely your choice. If you don't want to do it, it's or want to do it, it's absolutely fine. We don't have a problem with it. I guess for me, the real clash that has happened is within the overall Southern Asian community. So for them, they have really, because not only is child free and being unmarried one of my less conventional life choices, it's a lot of other things as well that Southern Asians typically tend to do that I wanted no part of, and I just don't do them. And that's what has caused a big rift between myself and the Southern Asian community overall. So they, in general, I'm not talking about my extended family. Everyone knows my choice and they're very supportive, but broader community. So, other Southern Asians I come across, and they all really don't understand not only this, but also the fact that I don't want to get married. The fact that I don't want to work in a corporate job or own a big house or be materialistic. I don't want to do any of those things. So they just think that something is wrong with me because I don't want that. I remember appearing on a podcast a couple of months ago where the podcast is actually called Leaving Toxic, and I've mentioned that why I have left the Southern Asian culture and community because it's so toxic. And in that episode is where I talk about this a lot, as to why, and that toxicity is what has actually influenced me in being child free, unconsciously, albeit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I think from a social media perspective and community perspective, the child free movement in Southern Asian countries, particularly India, is really growing at the moment. And the thing is now all these communities and these groups are very, what can I say, they will generally not show their faces because they don't want to be out and about in public. They don't want their family members to see it, so they'll just post like carousels and memes and everything else. But through Instagram and through other places, the child free community is really growing, and there are a lot of influencers in the group. But obviously, being in that space, they are pretty much, those people are not only misunderstood but also written off by their parents and shunned and shamed by their parents for their choice. So while doing anything revolutionary and out of the box in a country like India is almost impossible. So I commend the fact that these people have taken such an effort. I have it a little bit easier because I live in Australia where it's very normal to be child free. And also in my family, it's very normal to be child free. So I've rarely had any pushback.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I do go on those accounts and forums and I participate as much as possible. And I do remember speaking in the 2021 Childfree Convention as being child-free as an Indian person. So that's where I had a lot of a lot of questions about how it's like living really between two cultures and navigating that as a child-free person. So
Yeah. And I appreciate you sharing so much because again, I am not I'm only an expert in my life, right? And so it is so eye-opening to hear what other cultures and other women may experience, from family to marriage to being able to just make your own choice. So with you, one may say you may be an outlier. You're able to do this
very much so.
without any shame or guilt from your family. So how do you support women who may come to you and see you as, I want what she has, but I don't know how to achieve it or get it? What are the conversations that you are having with women in your culture about living their best unmarried life or child-free life?
It's a good question because one of my cousin sisters, she's 5 years younger than me, she has made a very similar choice. She does not want to get married. And again, her parents are pretty supportive. So in general, I would say my family, it's not been too bad, so they've sort of accepted whatever choice that we make. I suppose for me, a few instances I have come across people because of all the work I've done in the child free community. They see my work, contact me on Instagram and say, oh, I really want to be child free, but I don't know how to tell my parents. I don't know how to tell anybody, and if I don't know how to answer their questions. And for me, and in my some of the work that I do, I actually tell them that this is what this is what how you're supposed to navigate it. But I've had pretty candid, intimate conversations with these people, and I've said that yes, I've had it easier because of my family being progressive. But I've said to them that at the end of the day, they're not going to be the ones who are going to really do all the hard labor of raising the children. It's not even going to be your partner who's going to do it. It's going to be your responsibility 24/7. And on top of that, you have to take care of your partner's family. You have to just juggle everything, and all the drawbacks really of having this life. And also to really share with their family members and friends that uh it's not something that I want to do just to please. I don't owe anybody anything. I don't owe you guys grandchildren. I don't owe you a sibling or a cousin or anything like that. The world does not need more humans on this planet. A lot of Indian child free people are anti-natalists, and I'm one of them too. So
Mm-hmm.
so the whole, but antinatalism is it's a concept that people just don't understand, and so that's very hard for them to get their heads around, because the whole concept of being within the family, carrying on the family name, the legacy, and everything is really really big here. So yeah, just keep it. I've just told them to keep it very factual, and also just tell others that this does not require an explanation or justification or validation. I'm doing this I'm doing what's best for me.
Mm-hmm.
And if you cannot support me, that's fine. I don't need your support, but I also don't need your criticism constantly.
Yes.
So but yeah, but that takes a while, because Southern Asians are generally very people pleasing type. I used to be one of them too. They
Mm-hmm.
really want to please everybody. They want to really make everyone happy at their own expense. So I've shared my life experience with them, but whether their situations have been filled with less conflict or not, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as I know, they've all stuck to their guns and not had children because someone pressured them into it. So
Yeah.
as far as I know, yeah,
Okay. And I would imagine, Shweta, that some people that you encourage and motivate and talk to really take this information and try to say, what can I do with this to come to my own conclusion on what I want for my life? But I also hear how rigid some of the roles are and how difficult it can be for someone to step out of that. And with that being said, I would imagine some people are very unhappy, lonely, depressed, their mental health is compromised. But you were able to do that. So, how would you guide a person who says, you had it easy, but that's not going to work for me? Like,
yeah.
how can they hear you?
Yeah, I think the most important thing I would tell them is to find themselves a supportive community. So nowadays there's no shortage really of these groups. That's whether it's on Instagram, whether it's like what you do, or anywhere else, and you have membership groups as well in a lot of places where there's much more intimacy and people actually really share strategies and experiences and perspectives on how they can really have conversations with their near and dear ones who don't really understand their choice, or they judge them, or they stigmatize them, or whatever else. And those skills are really in these sort of subscription groups and community groups, these are very common questions that are brought up. And and there is a lot of support that goes on. Obviously, like with membership groups and subscriptions, it's paid, but you can jolly well you can start even if you don't have Instagram or something. There's always like Reddit. There's a lot of places. A lot of therapists also can provide help with doing this. And yeah, so whilst I might sort of be able to tell you quite, because it's funny because some of the things that I do as part of my job is helping communicate, communications coach. I do that. So, and but yeah, this is not some one and done. I can't just give them a checklist and say this is what you're supposed to say to someone who is bingoing you per se for being child free. But it is a work in progress. They have to really sort of rehearse and practice it on themselves or with myself or a few people. Because and at the end of the day, no is a complete sentence. They do not have to say anything more than no, I just don't want it. End of story.
Yes.
This does not require a reason or an explanation. So I'm just doing what's best for me, and that's the end of it. So yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much. So I want to go to your work with antinatalism, and I know that you said that that is a space that you occupy and feels good and comfortable for you. But for some people, like you said, some just don't get it. Now I know with my platform with no Bibs Burps bottles, that's not a space that I occupy often. I feel like I understand it, but how did you start to develop in this work in regards to antinatalism? What led you there? How did you get there? And what are you doing currently?
So in 2020 is when a lot of the articles and blog posts I wrote about being child free somehow went to people who were reading from India. And they were the ones who reached out to me, and they said, your perspective is this and that. And through them is what I learned about what antinatalism is, because as I said, a lot of child-free people are antinatal, child-free Indians, I should specify, are antinatalists. That's not to say that only like child-free people, all child-free people are antinatalists, or it's only exclusive to Southern nations. There's a lot of them who are. It's a very culturally diverse group. So I suppose from a young age, even though I didn't know what I didn't know that there was a word even called child free till 2015, and antinatalism is also a word that I did not know since as of 2020 was when the first time I was exposed to it. But as from a young age, this is what I used to question all the time: that why are people having biological children in a country like India that's so overpopulated when you have so many orphans that why are people not adopting or fostering? And I questioned this from a young age. It's one of the many things I questioned about the Southern Asian culture from a young age. And so in that way, I was, again, conditioned to be an antinatalist. I just didn't know that there was a label for it till 2020. And the more I looked into their work and I looked into the philosophy, I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly, it completely aligns with what I have believed from a young age. And then I saw a lot of antinatalist channels on antinatalism, YouTube channels and podcasts, learned a lot about it. There are some books as well I sort of briefly read. And so I did sort of get involved. I think sometimes where it gets a little bit tricky is that some antinatalists are also devout atheists and vegan. Not all of them, but some of them are. So when it goes in that direction, I feel I don't have much to contribute because I'm not an atheist, but I'm not religious either, but I'm also not vegan. So I don't really go in that direction very much. But, if there is anything to reduce suffering on this planet, anything to reduce suffering, not just to the planet, but to the concept of we are born into this world against our will. You can't get consent for something that's unborn. We're just forced into it, and we're just condemned to a life of suffering. It just does not sit well with me, and that's fine. And actually, at the start of this year, one of the antinatalist, his video on Channel 4, I think, and it's gone completely viral. He actually reached out to me, and they're having an antinatalist convention next month in December. So, and I've been chosen to be one of the panelists, so I'm quite excited about that. So, that's on the 2nd or 3rd of December. That's when my segment will be. Okay. I have to admit that my knowledge on antinatalism compared to what those guys have in that panel is very, very limited. So I have a lot of brushing up and catching up to do, really. But I'm going there as a child-free advocate per se, and really building a community. And that is going to be hard. I think it's easier to build a child-free community than an antinatalist community, because that's something that people just don't understand. They will, people who are child-free, they just have to, even though they may have friends who have children, they feel that they have to support it, and they feel that they have to really cater and pander to their parent friends, and I'm just the opposite. I feel like I don't have to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
they don't really understand the concept of antinatalism, that why it's important. And because antinatalism is so closely tied with veganism, and people just don't like vegans as a community, so it becomes the same problem. They think that antinatalism, we're just going out on a crusade telling people to just end their lives or whatever. It's not about that. It's about raising awareness of the consequences of bringing more humans into a world that's collapsing by the day. And just that it's hard to get people to understand, really.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of work to be done in that space, but hopefully this convention is a good starting point. It'll just
Yeah.
help people understand what it's all about,
Yeah.
actually.
Well, similar to the International Childfree Conference, and being
Mm-hmm.
able to inform and educate people about what it means to be child free. It sounds like this conference that you're going to be going to, and congratulations on that, that you'll also be in a space where you can inform. Just by listening to you now, I've learned a lot, just because I'm wondering, like, how did these three dynamics all come close together in regards to antinatalism, being atheist, and being vegan? Like, I'm like, how do those concepts all come together? So that, I find that interesting, because I did not know that. Did not know that. So one, I know recently I was asked, and I think it was a question that was meant to throw me off my game when I was on TikTok live. And it was just like, well, if all the child free people in the world just adopted kids, we would, there would be no foster care. Kids would not suffer. And so I present that to you, being child free, but also occupying the space of antinatalism. How would you respond to a question or a comment like that? Child free people should stop thinking about themselves and adopt, because that would end kids and babies in foster care.
Well, I would throw it back to them and say, why don't you do it if you're a parent, per se? We have chosen to be child free because we don't want to adopt either. Now, I have to say, if the circumstances in a parallel universe presented itself, that I had the money, I had the mental capacity, because that's what I don't have. I don't have the mental capacity to be a mother. I don't have the patience, I don't have the temperament, I don't have the selflessness, I don't have any of those things, or the maturity to be a mother. I will be the first person, and I have no problem telling others that I'm selfish. Yes, I am selfish with my time, my money, and everything like that. uh to That's why I've opted out of motherhood. But in a parallel universe, if I had all those things, I would be very open to adopting a teenager from a Southern Asian community who has been shunned off by their parents for being in the LGBTQ group, because that's quite common, for being atheist. So someone who's like that, because I can relate to that very well.
Mm-hmm.
So only in those a very out of the box circumstance is when I would consider adoption. But again, I really don't see it happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, why is it that child free people have to always pick up this burden? We are child free because we don't want kids. We don't want to parent any kids, whether it's biological, step, adoptive, or fostering. We don't want to do that. So if you want to be a parent, you should adopt. That should be your first resort. That if you're that concerned about, oh, there's so many kids in foster care, there's so this, and I hear this from parents all the time. Oh my god, the world is so terrible at the moment, but and I worry about my children. I'm like, well, you should have thought about that before you had your children.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that is one of the reasons why I have chosen to not do it.
Mm-hmm.
Not the main reason, but it is one of the reasons. But it is not our responsibility to really care for children that we never signed up for it, when we have made it very clear through our life choices and our lifestyle that we don't want that. So people who want to parent, if anything, it should be their responsibility to foster and adopt. I would go as far as to say that till every orphanage and foster home is clear and every child has a home, no one should be allowed to reproduce biologically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's because that is really being part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And again, yes, people might say that I am being very selfish by not having children, but then again, my selfishness is not impacting anyone else except me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, whereas when parents who, yes, parents are, any parent who has a biological child, it's never done for a selfless reason. It's always for a selfish reason.
Mm-hmm.
Their selfishness impacts everybody, the child that never asked to be born, the world, the planet. The chain effect is much larger. Whereas for me, I'm just out here minding my own business, living my own life as a selfish child-free person. No one is affected by it except for probably my partner, but he's child-free as well. So it doesn't bother him. So, and no one else, I'm not depriving somebody of a child that they wanted. Again, it's not my business to give anyone a child, plain and simple, but back to that thing, my parents also, they want an easy life now. They don't want to babysit grandchildren. They don't want, they babysit my dog from time to time. That's more than,
Mine
they're very
too.
happy with him. They're very happy with having that him as a grandchild, so they're very happy with that. So they want an easy life now. They've worked very hard all their 20-30 years to get to where they are now. Like, they just want an easy, flexible life. They don't want to give they see their friends do it with their children and grandchildren. They're like, we want no part of that. So so they're very relieved that I have chosen to not have children.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, my selfishness is not impacting anything. And if anything, I'm doing this out of a very selfless intent, because I don't want a human that never asked to be born to be forced into existence in this world, because I selfishly want that, and just make them suffer in this world where there's nothing good can come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So just being child free can really be seen as a selfless act of love, even though contrary to popular belief.
Yes.
That's a way of looking at it.
Yes, yes. And you bring and raise up a good point that makes me remember when I was a practicing clinician and talking to young adults who were having a hard time, not only with their mental health, but having a hard time with their family, and recalling stories of young adults who said, like, I didn't ask to be here. Like, I'm caught up in this poverty and this drama and this family mess, and it's tearing me apart mentally, emotionally. And I've heard it where people say, I didn't ask for this life, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
makes sense that many of us are being intentional on bringing children in the world. The anti-natalism movement, in regards to, so many people are in this world and not everyone is flourishing, not everyone is
Yes.
thriving. Many people are hurting and many people are suffering. So why not stop and pause and be intentional before you make a
Mm-hmm.
decision? So I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about your parents. So you
Mm-hmm.
talked about your culture and how if you're not married and you don't have kids, it's almost like you're shunned. Something's wrong with you. With did your parents get that pressure from other adults? So were other people looking at your parents like, why this is not traditional? What's wrong with your daughter? Like, help us understand. Did your parents get pressure?
Not really. I think when people do ask about my parents, about me, they keep things very low key. They just say, "Oh yeah, she's working, she's living her life." They just don't disclose much. And also, people, as far as I know, they don't. Again, I really don't know many details, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But they basically, they don't really disclose what I do on a day-to-day basis. And I don't think they've really been asked a lot of questions about why am I not married, or whether I'm married and all that. I suppose in a place like India, maybe it's probably more prevalent. Like my cousin sister, who's 5 years younger than me,
Mm-hmm.
she uh she people just joke with her all the time that she's not married, and my cousin sister is a very chilled out, happy-go-lucky, jovial, bubbly person. So she will just have a joke with them about it. But if the same person came and said that to me, it'll be a very different reaction, because for me it's it's very upsetting, it's very triggering. So I will just you will see the worst of me when someone who's Southern Asian and asks me this question about my any of my life choices.
Mm-hmm.
For example, my partner is who's we're in an interracial relationship. Now that again is some Southern Asians will completely hate that. So they might question that. They might question, why am I living in a small a small apartment? Why am I not living in a big house? Why am I these kind of questions? I just don't entertain that. So for me, people know, whether it's through my parents or whether it's they've had these run-ins with me, that they know very well now to not bring these things up with me. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I don't know. I think in my family, as I said, because I'm not the only one who has
Yes.
made the choice to be unmarried and child free, I don't think they find it unusual.
Hmm.
They might find it a little bit unusual that my partner is not is Caucasian, like he's white. So that's something that they may probably not receive very well. But other than that, and also the fact that we're living together without getting married, that's probably is something that they would probably not like very much. But other than that, I think the fact that I'm just not married and don't have children, my at least my immediate family, I don't see them having a problem with it. So, but again, again, as I said, my I have really cut myself off from the Southern Asian community. So, whatever they have, they don't know that I exist, and if they do have an opinion or two, I really don't care because, as I said, they don't play any role in my life anymore. So,
Exactly, exactly.
yeah.
And a lot of times decisions, life decisions, for other people, they were like, wow, how did you do that? But when you just think about choosing happiness, and that's something that I say, choose happiness, be intentional on choosing peace. It actually is pretty easy because we're making life choices that sit well with us, that brings us happiness, that brings us peace, that brings us stability. We start to kind of go stir crazy when we're actually living for other people. So it makes sense
Hmm.
that you're like, this is what works for me, and mom and
Hmm.
dad and family, they can agree. But if they disagreed, it sounds like you would be just fine.
I'll be fine. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine. Hmm.
yeah. So can we talk a little bit about your partner? So I know
Hmm.
when I talk to guests, I share and ask, when you're thinking about dating, you have to be intentional when you're
Hmm.
child free. And I've dated people with kids, I've dated people who are child free. So my question to you, when you thought about dating and approaching the partner that you have now, were you like, they can't have kids? Were you open to dating someone with kids where they had to be adult kids, little kids? What were your dating
Hmm.
requirements prior to
Yeah,
this
yeah.
relationship?
Oh, I had a massive, massive checklist, and it was nothing superficial either. Because a lot of women, they're like, oh, he has to earn this much money, he has to drive this type of car. I did not care about any of those things. For me, it was 100% for me. I did not want to date anyone who was Southern Asian. I was very, very clear. I came out of a very abusive relationship in 2014 with a Southern Asian, and since then I made up my mind I will just not go down this path because me and Southern Asians just never work. We are just too different. Yeah. And also the fact that they all want children and they all want the whole family life, and I have to take care of their parents. I'm like, I'm not doing that. Uh so when I got serious about dating in 2014, or I'd say even 2017 onwards, this is what my requirements were: this, that I want someone who doesn't have children of their own, so including adult children. I was very clear about that. No adult children, no little children, nobody. Someone who obviously doesn't want children, comes from a family that is not dysfunctional.
Mm.
So, I mean, look, no family is perfect. My family isn't. But I was very clear that I don't want a family where there is going to be dysfunctionality, toxicity, drama, uh, you know, unresolved generational trauma. I was very clear about that, that I don't want to become a part of that type of family. And also someone who would prioritize me, put me and our relationship first, and is open to building a life that's really on our terms, and it's quite flexible.
Mhm.
And despite that, and whenever I did come into contact with some men, I would bring up within the first 5 minutes that this is what you're getting yourself into, that I am a child-free woman, I don't have children, and I don't ever want children, and no one is going to be changing my mind. uh so they knew
Very clear.
exactly what they were getting. I was very clear from so I did not waste any time. If they were not on the same page, I would just not take it further. So some people find out, they'll go on the first date and then they found out, oh, this is, we don't want the same things. For me, I just avoided that problem entirely
Mhm.
altogether. So I said to them, yeah, so, and it was no different from when my partner and I came in contact with each other. And again, I said the same thing to him, that this is my stance. I don't have children, I don't want children. I got a little bit suspicious when
Hey,
I'm stopping my own YouTube video and podcast episode to let you know about NoBibsBurpsBottles.com. That's right, stop and visit our website today. We have a bunch of awesome child-free pride merchandise made especially for you. Visit NoBibsBurpsBottles.com today. Peace.
And when he added me on Facebook, and then I saw a picture of him with 2 boys, and I'm like, "Oh, what have you been?" So I was pretty cross with him.
You
I'm
gotta
like, "Who are these
investigate
two?"
this.
Yeah, and then he told me they're actually my nephews.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. I mean, I don't have a problem with, and I'm actually very close to his 2 nephews now. So that so that kind of worked out. And yeah, they were actually his nephews. When I did meet his mother, and she said it's his sister's kids. All right, so that was a bit of a relief. But yeah, and turns out that my partner actually has a genetic condition. It's called Klinefelter syndrome. I'm not sure if you're aware of it. So basically, he has 2 X chromosomes. So
yes. Mm-hmm.
typically men have X and Y, so he's got
Yes.
2 X's and Y. So which makes him sterile. So he doesn't produce any sperm. So he cannot biologically have children. And so that worked out for us. So yeah, so that was a huge win.
Yeah.
So yeah, he can't have kids, and he's relieved because he also biologically he's never wanted them. So that was a very easy it was a very easy conversation for us to have. And he has a very special, very different relationship. I wouldn't say special, but a different relationship with his nephews than I do. And that is something I completely support him in doing. He wants to play a big role in his nephews' lives, spend time with them, go to their sport matches and things like that, teach them how to drive when they get older. That's absolutely fine. I completely support that. And if anything, I will also help out when I can. So, and he babysits them from time to time because they're like 9 and 11 now. So, and if he wants to do that and be involved in his friends' children's lives, or his anyone in his family, if they have children in their lives, I don't have a problem with that. So, as long as biologically that or for whatever reason, as long as he doesn't want children of his own, which we've been very clear about, and we're not next year in March we would have been together for 4 years. So yeah.
Congrats. I want to thank you for being transparent when you talked about your past relationship and that ending in 2014, and it being an abusive relationship where you decided to leave and take care of you. Again, a lot of my experiences come from conversations that I have in my DMs or on lives. So as you shared that, it took me back to a comment that someone left about you're probably child free and you're not married because you've had some type of trauma, some type of childhood trauma, or some man has done you wrong. And this is the reason why you are now the way you are. One could say, I'm thinking about that comment and how it applies to what you shared, where the reason why you're child free and the reason why you are anti-natalist and the reason why is because of this traumatic relationship that you were in. How would you respond to that? Because there are a lot of people who believe we've had some type of crisis that has determined why we have decided not to have kids.
And that is not uncommon, but it's also not the norm. You can't generalize that all child-free people are child-free because of they've had childhood trauma or some relationship trauma or whatever. I admit I have a lot of trauma from that relationship in 2014, which does surface from time to time. But that's got nothing to do with why I'm child-free. I was child-free when I was 6 or 7, since the second I was born. So I was child-free even at the time. So that relationship, the only thing that it has done is to tell me to not get involved with Southern Asians, and that was it. So it has not made me child-free or anything like that. And yes, a lot of people, like in my case, I come from a very stable, secure, loving family. Despite that, I'm child-free. So it really has nothing to do, childhood trauma has nothing to do with being child-free, in the sense that, yes, that is a reason, but that's not the only reason why people become child-free. And another way of looking at it is that a lot of parents have unresolved childhood trauma. and they have children as a band-aid, as instead of going to therapy and dealing with that trauma, they will have children to put a band-aid on that, really, and really passing it down to them. And well, so trauma is not really a determinant to whether you're going to be child free or not, you know. And I have to say, if you indeed have had trauma of some sort, for whatever the reason is, it's a smart thing to actually be child free, because you know that this is, if I don't work on myself and don't heal myself, this is going to unintentionally and unconsciously be passed down to the child that never asked to be born. So
Yes.
you are really ending the cycle of your of misery and suffering by really ending that curse, really, that generational curse, as they call it. So to me, it's a very wise, smart, conscious, and informed move. So, but then again, that's like me generalizing that again, like all child-free people are atheists, and all atheists are vegan, all atheists are or sorry, all child-free people are anti-natalist, all anti-natalists are vegan. There's no connection with all of them. But that's similarly, not all child-free people again dislike children, because that's another assumption that people have, that
Exactly.
child-free people dislike children, and a lot of them do. Don't get me wrong. Like I will say I dislike children who are under the age of 8. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be around them. So,
Mm-hmm.
but when they're over the age of 8 and 9, when they can talk, when they're a little bit more independent, I can handle them in small doses, but I
Yes.
have to be able to give them back. So, and I was actually a teacher for a very long time. I was in the education system. So I worked with children for a very long time. And
Mm-hmm.
even now, I'm very good with teenagers, because teenagers is who I used to work with. Uh, and similarly, childhood trauma is not a determinant of whether you are going to be a parent or not. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and as I said, if that's your reason to not want to be a parent, that's completely okay. And as if it's something wrong, is there something wrong with you? You never asked to be traumatized. You never asked to be born. So, you can't blame yourself just
Yes.
because of that. So, yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So in your culture, um, I know we can use the words child free and childless interchangeably. And I know
Mm-hmm.
my platform, I try my best to share what I believe the differences are, what I've been informed and educated on the differences. But I also take the stance of I'm not here to define you, right? If you want to child free, childless, like I know who I am and I want to empower people to choose how they want to self identify. But in
Mm-hmm.
regards to um, your culture in regards to childless and child free? Are there differences? Are you shunned more if you can't have a child opposed to not wanting to have a child? If that makes sense.
Yeah. I guess I don't know. I think again, there is a big difference between child free and childless.
Mhm.
There's no sort of you can't argue with that. You know, even though some childless people will call themselves child free, and it's okay for people to come to that decision that they're happy being child free. There's nothing wrong with that, but they are not inherently they're not inherently I suppose childless, the child free, because they tried having a child and they couldn't have it. And I guess in my culture, if you are childless, maybe there's a little bit of you get a little bit of pity. I don't know. Maybe fake pity. I don't know. I really can't. I won't be able to tell you that. But also, people really will give you unsolicited advice, and because, as I said, India is very influenced heavily by religion. They might say, oh, you do this type of prayer, you keep this type of fast, go to this temple, and God willing, something will, you will get the good news. Or they will give really rubbish advice on, this, you should take, these herbs and these tablets and this and that. So or they will say that, have you, again, they might ask, have you considered adoption, are you trying for IVF? I will and so they'll give you unnecessary pushback this
Mhm.
way. So, and it can be very insensitive, when you are coming to terms with the fact that, yeah, having a child is not probably going to be for you, it's not in the cards for you. It's not really meant with compassion and support. It's just met with a little bit of fake pity, but also this unnecessary unsolicited advice from people who yeah, people who could very easily have children. So and then again, depending on how conservative the family is, again, they, you may not, the husband's parents may not actually treat you very well. They may make you feel invisible. They may just exclude you from a lot of things, or they might assume that you bring bad luck or bad omens, so they just keep you away from everything. That can happen.
Wow.
Yeah, so that, I mean, yeah, I think it's just, I think childless people can be subject, and I think if you're a childless man, it's not as bad, whereas if you're a childless woman, it's much more serious. So yeah, people just can't get their head around, if a couple can't have kids, that it's always the woman's fault. So but yeah, men like my partner, he's infertile, so it's an infertility is not just limited to women. So yeah, but yeah, if you are choosing to be child free, I think there is, the disapproval is much stronger if you do that, whereas as opposed to if you are childless, I would say.
Right. Thank you. So let's talk about friendships, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so you kind of shared earlier about, not being around a lot of kids if you had it your way outside of your partner's nephews. And then again, being able to support that there are too many people on this earth, and we need to decrease people's suffering in general. What would you say about how your culture goes about really spreading, like, are you the only one that's sharing this message, or do you feel like you can name 6 or 7 other individuals in your culture who are also talking proudly and loudly about being child free? Is it something that is just you and you have the weight of the world on your shoulder, or do you feel like this is something that's being talked about and people are actually listening?
Yeah, definitely. I'm not the only one, because I actually heard about antinatalism, or explored more of antinatalism, on a very popular YouTube channel called Nihil Anand. And Nihil Anand is an Indian fellow who talks a lot about antinatalism and being child free, and he's very popular. So, and he's very vocal, he's very open. I don't think he, like, the name that he goes by, I don't think that's his real name.
Okay.
So I think that's a little pseudonym that he has. So yeah, but as I said, people, I think out in the open, I think for me, I'm more about building a community and building support, I would say. Whereas for him is like, you should reduce suffering and that type of thing. So it's not just the two of us. I'm sure that there are so many people in the Indian and Southern Asian community, like the lady that I partnered with in the 2021 convention, Nandita Bajaj. She does a lot of work in this area. So, I'm not the only one, for sure.
Okay.
But then again, we are very much in the minority.
Yes.
Like, even if you are child free, it's very tabooed in my culture to talk about it openly. Like, even yesterday, I was having this conversation with my mom. Now, my mom completely supports my choice to be child free, but she does not understand why. She feels that me being this vocal, me forming all these groups, these communities, is really unnecessary, because she thinks that, oh, it's not very normal to be child free. I'm like, well, yes, that's the case with me, but not everyone is that lucky. They don't feel this is what people who make the choice to be child free, this is what they go through in the hands of society, and they feel very isolated, lonely, judged, and excluded. And I don't want them to feel like there's something wrong with them, and that's why I do the work that I do in this space. So and talking about communities, I'm actually a part of this, where I live in Melbourne, Australia. We are the fastest growing demographic amongst everyone. So it's like 1 in 3 people in Melbourne, Australia is child free. So it's very common here to not want children or have children. And I'm part of a community of women. It's just for women who like me are, again, who don't have children, mostly by choice, but also some of them have it, it just didn't happen for them. They're childless. And we get together quite often. Like they all organize events. I don't have the time to go to every single event, so I catch up with them once a month. And I've made, and we have a group on Facebook where we sort of share different experiences, what we went through. And I've made some really good friends in that. Again, and most of my friends, I will say, they don't have children. So for me, it's never been a problem that my friendships have changed because they have children. A handful of my friends do have children, and some of them do definitely want children at some point. But thanks to this group, majority of my friends do not have children, so
Okay.
I'm very happy about that.
Yeah. And so it's good to have child-free friends who are organizing and planning and informing. And it's good to
Mm-hmm.
have your friend group that where you're not the only one, right? And a lot of times in spaces, at least the women that I chat with, sometimes they are the only one. So it's one, and then their friend group is 15 women who all have kids, and
Yes.
navigate that. And so it's good to hear what you're doing in Australia, and it's good to hear about the other individuals who are also doing the work. So Sweta,
Mm-hmm.
because you and I actually are vocal about being child free and we're creating community, a question that sometimes I get is, why are you focused on Black women? And the reason why I started No Bibs, Burps, Bottles is because I needed a community that looked like me. I felt misunderstood. I felt guilt.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to know I wasn't the only one, but my
Mm-hmm.
identity as a Black woman is very salient for me. And so, do
Okay.
you get the question, or have you gotten the question of, why did you focus on minority women? And maybe that's me saying that because you never said that that's your focus, but I know
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I get that, like, the child free community is big and you're isolating people and you need to be more inclusive. And I'm like, well, are you going to the white platforms and saying that to them, right? So what are your
Mm.
thoughts about that, with both of us being
Yeah.
women of color and really trying to empower individuals that look like us or maybe have similar backgrounds?
Yeah. I guess when what you just said is a very classic example of being woke, so the whole woke, so everyone has to be in everyone's spaces. So, and it's completely okay. And now you're not saying that you will just not deal with women, white women who are child free. That's not your point. But you are niching that's what niching things down is. That's what it means. So you are specializing in one very particular focused area of being child free. For me, again, when I build communities or when I get more people to join this particular group, I don't really go on and say, whether I don't care if they're what culture they come from. I don't care if they are what sexuality they have, what religion they're from, or I would go as far as to say that, as long as you identify as a woman, so you are, transgender or non-binary, it's okay. You are still welcome to join this group as long as you don't have children and you don't want them. So,
Mhm.
for me, the more diverse the group is, the better it is. I suppose for me, I can relate to women of color a little bit better because I have had similar experiences to them, I suppose, in one way or other, and I am aware of how much stigma and how misunderstood and judged we are because of our life choices anyway, not just about being child free or anything. So there's more common ground with them. Now, I'm not saying that people who are in the white community that they don't get pushback at all for being child free. That's not true.
Mhm.
I know a lot of people who get a
Yes.
lot of grief for they get treated differently for being child free. So I don't think it's mutually exclusive. So the more, now that's what I do, and that I'm sure it's valuable, but I'm what you do is equally valuable, which
Mhm.
is bringing together women of African American women, and where in a space that again that where that is again very pronatalist. There's a lot of social pressure, cultural pressure for them to be mothers, and they might feel like I don't know where to turn to. So and it's good that you're actually expanding now out into not just women who are of your similar background as you, but also women like me who are
Mhm.
of albeit women of color, albeit of a different color. So
Mhm.
yeah, just that
Mhm.
there's a lot of commonalities in both those spaces for sure.
Yes, yes. And that's why I was so excited when you reached out to me, because again, I have my primary audience, but I also aim to grow and learn myself. And when I think
Mm-hmm.
about different cultures and different experiences, I say, are they similar? What are the similarities? What are the differences? And so that's why I opened up. I was ready to jump in with that first question in regards to, what does it mean to be, child free in your culture? Because I would imagine it's maybe different, similar, some intersection of how it is for
Mm-hmm.
me to be a Black female. So as we come to a close, Shweta, I am going to say a comment to you, and I just want your feedback. So I
Sure.
sometimes say people will see me as a Black female before they see me as a Black child-free female. And again, being in the US, where there's been a lot of challenges with African American people, some people can just see me being a Black female and make assumptions, right? Have stereotypes, biases, judgments. So as I say that to you, how do your intersections of identities, what do they mean to you? What comes up for you when you think about yourself being an Indian female, being an Indian female who's also child free, and those three identities kind of coming together?
Yeah, I mean, for me, because as I said, I've now cut myself off from the Southern Asian community altogether. I proudly say, because I have the citizenship of Australia, I just say that I'm Australian. And now, like, for example, you're American. So, all Americans and Australians don't just all look white. So, as long as you have that nationality and that passport, you are Australian. So that's what I say to people, because I teach students from all over the world. I teach English as a second language, and I tell people that I'm from Australia. I don't say that I have an Indian background,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously being child free is a huge part of my identity. I think I identify more as an Australian child free woman.
Awesome.
Woman of
Okay.
color. That's a simple way of putting it. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And thank you
Mm-hmm.
for clarifying for me, because I also don't want to label you or misidentify
Mm-hmm.
you. So thank you so much for clarifying
Mm-hmm.
for me. So here's the opportunity, and I've enjoyed this conversation so much. Here's the opportunity where I tell people to shine like a diamond. And what I mean by
Mm-hmm.
that is that I want to know what you're doing that's on the horizon that's important for you. Please let our audience and our listeners know what amazing things do you have, outside of the conference that you're going to do next month.
Mm-hmm.
What amazing
Yeah.
things you're doing, and where people
Yeah.
can find you should they
Yeah.
actually want to continue the conversation with you.
Sure. So yeah, as you just mentioned, I'm a panelist at the 2023 anti-natalism advocacy convention. That's in December. If you just look up anti-natalist advocacy on YouTube, that's where it's being live streamed, and obviously recordings will be available. And yeah, I think next year again I'll be a panelist again in the child free convention. I'll be speaking about child free entrepreneurship, so that because I've now gone into that space, because I'm just now working on building a business that's in the communication space, where I help healthcare professionals from non-English speaking backgrounds improve their communication and language skills. So yeah, you can find out about all of that in the best place to find me and what I do in the child free space is on Instagram. So, I've got an Instagram handle, child free SR, Buddy's mum. So Buddy is my dog. So, I'm his mum. So that's the second part of it. So, yeah. And I'm also on Twitter. Just it's my name, look up Shweta Ramkumar. I'm also on TikTok. Again, I don't really go very often on TikTok to really make content. It's just generally for just watching dog videos. And obviously, I have my YouTube channel, and I think the most active, if you really want to get in contact with me, will be on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is the best place to find me. But yeah, obviously, I'll let you know what those links are, and you can just put them in the show notes.
Yep,
That's
I
fine.
will put everything in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for joining me this evening. So you've heard it here. You've heard all the great things that Shweta is doing, and I'll have all her information in the show notes. I want to thank everyone from the sound of my voice. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening on Spotify, thank you so much for joining No Bibs, Burps, Photos. I'm so excited about this bonus episode, and please come back. Stay tuned for more interviews. We love to have you, and please leave a comment. Please subscribe. And again, thank you so much for joining us. And as we always close, please remember that womanhood is not synonymous with motherhood. Peace.